Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, members of the governing party and ex-rebels attend a new session of parliament in South Sudan as part of the terms of a 2018 peace agreement. But the internet is also cut ahead of planned protests against President Salva Kiir. Also, the runner-up in Tunisia's 2019 presidential elections reportedly arrested in Algeria. Nabil Karoui has been under investigation since 2017 in a money laundering and tax evasion case. And Libya still faces daily reminders of the turmoil caused by a violent decade since the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The devastated infrastructure has left many facing regular power cuts. But first, South Sudanese authorities have denied shutting down the internet the day before an anti-government rally planned for Monday. The protest against President Salva Kiir didn't take place. The country's trying to navigate its way through a fragile 2018 peace deal that ended 5 years of brutal civil war in which around 400,000 people died. On Monday, ex-rebels attended a new session of parliament alongside members of Kiir's party, as set out in that peace agreement. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. Yaw Tchie, who is a senior research fellow who specialises in peace and security at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. Doctor, thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, Monday we saw the very first parliamentary session with representatives from both sides of South Sudan's conflict, as stipulated by that peace deal. Do you see this as a good sign regarding progress towards the country's stability?
I think this is a step in the right direction. It's a first step to trying to bring forward or to meet some of the provisions within the agreement. But it's yet to be seen how things will be governed and how the state itself will form going forward. Bearing in mind, there are other stipulations within the agreement that need to be sorted out. For example, the unified army, which hasn't been met yet. So this is, as I said, a step in the right direction. However, let's see. It's always time will tell whether or not they deliver on being able to govern, but also deliver for the people in the country as well.
Now, there already is quite a lot of frustration amongst many South Sudanese. We saw internet access being restricted from Sunday night ahead of a planned protest against President Kiir. Now, the government does say that it was just because of technical problems, but that explanation has been met with some skepticism. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, having lived there myself, I mean, there are internet connection issues for those who've lived in South Sudan, but it is unusual. I mean, this is the MTN line that broke down. In addition to that, there's also concerns about how long the phone lines or the internet connection was down. There were independent verifications outside of the country that has said that actually the internet connection and the period of time that it's been down doesn't really match up. But it does set a pattern, or should I say, it does look like a similar pattern that we're seeing in other parts of Africa, or the Horn, should I say, in this case, Ethiopia, Uganda, particularly around elections, you tend to see this sort of internet break or internet cutoff. So this is something that I've seen before. Whether or not this is something that we're going to continue to see in South Sudan, I guess the jury is out on this one.
And with regard to the reason for that planned protest, why at this juncture is there this resurgence of calls for Kiir's exit?
Well, I think for many people in South Sudan, it's the continuous use of violence. Corruption is high. Not being able to meet the agreement, the constant violence that women and children suffer. In addition to that, you have economic development has not really grown. To a large extent, developmental issues, in this case, health issues, the handling of the COVID-19 situation, all of which mount up to what many call an incompetent government. And so if you take that and you multiply that over the last 50 years, I'm talking about when Sudan and South Sudan were one country, it's been continuous interruptions in developing and moving Sudan or South Sudan forward. And so I think a lot of people, after a decade now of the independence, are going, actually, what is going on? What is happening? And is this government delivering what we expect? Which was supposed to be a new Sudan. Don't forget, one of the world's youngest countries, but also one that really and truly had the opportunity to be able to do many things that the other African countries hadn't done. It had the oil resources, it had natural resources, and it had the opportunity to develop and move itself forward, and it hasn't really done that. And so there's growing concerns about Kiir, about his leadership style, about the colonialism that has taken place, his big tent approach, and whether actually that has worked, but also how that hasn't moved South Sudan forward. And that frustration is what has led to many calling for Kiir to stand down. It's not just the people, but it's also senior leadership within the SPLM, which is the movement section. And I think fundamentally, there has been a lack of vision. What does this new South Sudan look like? What will it involve? How is it going to be more people-focused? And what is the end goal for the people of South Sudan? And that vision hasn't been met over the last decade.
Oh, thanks very much, Dr. Yaw Tchie there, speaking to us about the hurdles facing South Sudan as it tries to move towards stability. Well, look now at some other news. The wife of late Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana has failed to stop a French investigation into her role in the 1994 genocide in the country. Agathe Kanziga has denied helping plan the massacre of around 800,000 Tutsis and Hutus opposed to the slaughter. The 78-year-old has been living in France since 1998. The investigation's been underway since 2008, and Kanziga's lawyers have argued that the case has progressed too slowly. Meanwhile, France will send 10 million doses of AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines to Africa over the next 3 months. The doses will be handed out through the WHO's COVAX scheme and the African Union's AVAT program. South Africa, which has been campaigning for more equal access to jabs between global nations, has said the move is a welcome gesture of solidarity and cooperation. Meanwhile, former Tunisian presidential candidate Nabil Karoui has reportedly been arrested in Algeria. The media mogul and leader of the Heart of Tunisia political party was released from pre-trial detention in June, facing money laundering and tax evasion charges. Karis Garland tells us more.
A key figure in Tunisia's political and media landscape, Nabil Karoui has been arrested again, but this time in Algeria. Police detained the leader of the Heart of Tunisia party, as well as his brother and Tunisian MP Khazi Karoui near the Algerian town of Tebessa on Sunday. It's alleged they were at the apartment of a former Algerian lawmaker after crossing the border illegally. The Karoui brothers launched their global communications agency in 1996. The firm now has offices across the Middle East and North Africa. The arrest comes after Karoui spent more than 6 months in Tunisian custody on money laundering and tax evasion charges. He was released on June 15, and the case is still being investigated. The former presidential hopeful has previously said he's innocent and the charges against him are purely political. Karoui has not appeared in public since Tunisian President Kais Saied dismissed his prime minister, froze parliament, and assumed executive authority last month, a sudden intervention that his critics have labelled a coup.
Libya is still struggling to settle on a roadmap for crucial polls due in December. Much of the country still faces daily reminders of the turmoil caused by a decade of violence and political instability that followed the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The devastated infrastructure has left many facing regular power cuts. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
All over Libya, people have to use diesel-fueled generators. Many of them face power cuts that can last 12 hours a day. 10 years after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, the fighting in the country has badly affected the power distribution network. This mechanic in Benghazi says sometimes he can't work for days. This small shop in Benghazi faces similar problems.
الدكان موجودة هي أكتريتها ثلاجات ومنظومة وكلها تشتغل بالضي والثلاجات فين دجاج وفين جلاطي وفين كلها نفسنا من قطاع الكهرباء والله حقيقة يعني الضي هذا تعب لنفسيتنا بصدق وأمانة يعني ما.
In the capital Tripoli, temperatures can sometimes reach 40 degrees Celsius.
طبعا بخطوط أزمة الكهرباء من 10 سنوات ليبيا تعاني من أزمات الكهرباء ما فيش أي تعديل وعود من حكومات متتابعة مجرد وعود الوضع مزري جدا هروب طويل جدا لساعات الكهرباء وخصوصا فترات الصيف.
But there is hope that power cuts could start to diminish as the political situation is slowly improving. The most recent round of fighting ended with a UN-backed ceasefire last year. Elections are planned in December, and 2 new power stations are currently under construction in Tripoli and Misrata.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.